friends, and welcome back to my crafty space. My name is Crystal, and in today's video, I am going to be creating a hybrid layout using the Evening Story Kit from Ali Edwards. Today's project is going to be a little bit more labor intensive than a lot of the projects that I normally create. So I just want to give that to you as a heads up, just to let you know that there are going to be a lot of moving pieces in today's spread. But if it turns out how I hope it's going to turn out, I think that the labor is going to be well worth it. So a couple of things that I have on my table here today to work with. Number one is a cut file that I created using one of the journaling cards from the digital kit. So I am going to head over to the computer here in just a second, and I will show you how I created this cut file in addition to the rest of the pieces I'm using today. The next thing that really drew my eye was a 3x4 journaling card with this sentiment on it. So it says, "The moon is a reminder that no matter what phase I am in, I am still whole." And that got me thinking about the phases of life, how there are many phases of life that we go through. So my plan is to actually cut this out using a circle cutter that I have here. And then I have 6 additional phases of the moon where I have added journaling in there, and then I have also printed some photos that I'm going to use on the spread with the moons, which we'll get to that here, and you will see a little bit better what I mean when I say that. But before we get into all of this, let's head over to the computer so I can show you how I created all of these individual components so that when we come back here, all we have to do is assemble. All right, friends, so I am over here on Photoshop Creative Cloud, where I'm going to show you how I put together all of the digital elements before I printed them off and brought them over to my desk. So first and foremost, I am using 3 of the digital journaling cards to create today's spread. The first one is going to become my background. So it is the white star pattern, and I believe the original card, yes, is a 3x4 card. So what I wanted to do was to make this the size of a 8.5 by 11 inch piece of cardstock. So I am cropping this down to 8.5 by 11, which is already in here. So I hit the crop button, put 8.5 inches by 11 inches at 300 pixels per inch, and I'm just going to hit the enter button to crop that. I will grab my magnifying glass and make this print size. That way it zooms it out so I can see a little bit better what this is going to look like. Then the next thing that I needed to do was to make the star portions black and the background white. So I'm going to go up to my top menu and click on Select and then Color Range. This is going to let me select one specific color, and it's going to highlight anything on the page that is the same color as what I select. So what I want to make sure, so if I'm doing the background, then the whole background will be white. If I'm doing the stars, which is what I want, then all of the stars will show up as white. Once I have that done, I'm just going to hit OK. And it's going to put these little marching ants around all of those stars, letting me know that they are all selected currently. So then I'm going to go over to Edit and Fill. And then I want to fill these stars with my background color, which right now is black. So if black was in the foreground, I would want the foreground color, but I'm going to select background. That way they turn black, and I will hit OK. So now when I unselect or deselect, we can see that all of those stars are filled in with black. There is a little bit of a white outline around them, but that's okay. So next, I just want to grab my paint can. I have white in my foreground, and then I'm just going to paint in the background. So now we have a white background with black stars, and I'm going to save it just like this. So we'll go Save, and let's just call this a star background cut file. And then I want to make sure it's saved as a PNG or as a JPEG. Either one of those would be fine. And we'll hit OK and OK. So once that is saved, we're going to hop over to Silhouette, which let me close out. This is what it will look like, but let me close out of that so you can see this. So we're going to open up the star background cut file that we just created in Silhouette, and you can see here that it is still 8.5 by 11 inches. I will come over to the right side and click on this little butterfly icon, and then we're going to select trace area. So we'll click on that. This is going to let me click and drag a window around the section that I want to create a cut file with. And you can see that all of those black stars are now highlighted yellow. That means that they are being picked up by the system. And when I go ahead and cut around or trace the outer edge, it's going to trace the outer edge of everything that's yellow. So that's what I'm going to hit, is trace outer edge. And then I can come back to my cut file itself if I wish and go ahead and delete that background. And you can see now all the little red lines for all the little stars. So what I'm going to do with this is I am going to cut this out, which, by the way, before you cut it, make sure you save it. So I'm going to save it as star background cut file, and this time it'll be a Studio 3 because it's in Silhouette. So I would send this to my Silhouette, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it out on some cheapo white cardstock because I am actually going to use it as a stencil to add on some texture paste onto my actual page. So that is the first part of what we are creating. Now let me go ahead and close out of that. And we're going to move on next to the feature part. That is not what I wanted. The feature part of this spread, which is another 3x4 card. This one has the moon in the middle with a bunch of stars around it, and it says the moon is a reminder that no matter what phase I am in, I am still whole. And I loved that as a jumping off point for telling the story about the phases of life. So what I want to do with this is to blow it up to be a full page element. So I am going to crop this to 6.875 inches wide by 8.25 inches tall. And it's going to keep that moon in the center here. I'm just going to hit enter, and it's going to zoom it way, 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 way in. So we'll grab that magnifying glass and do print size, and that will zoom it out to what it's actually going to look like when it comes off the printer. So with this piece, I am thinking I'm going to print it off on clear acetate and then attach that somehow to the interactive elements that I'm going to create to go behind it. But I'm not sure yet. We'll see as we go. But this is the base of what I want to create today. So now that I have that done, I want to next pull up this 6x4 card. So this one has a bunch of different phases of the moon on it. And I want to isolate each one of them to create a journaling card or like a circle card where I can add text and a photo. So the first thing I will do is come over to my rectangular marquee tool, and I am going to draw a rectangle around each of these moons. So I'm going to start here. Once I have it selected, I will right click and layer via copy. Then I need to go to my layers panel down in the bottom right hand corner and select the background layer again. And then I can do this again for the next one. And we will do the same thing, layer via copy. Come down to the layers panel, select the background. So you're just going to keep doing that until you have all of these copied, except for this middle one. We don't actually need the middle one because the quote that we just did earlier, that is going to serve as our middle moon piece, which you'll see here in just a second. So I've got one more, and then layer via copy. So then what I'm going to do is hide all of these layers. Well, actually, we'll unselect we'll unlock the bottom layer and delete that one. We don't need it anymore. So we're going to hide all the layers, and then one at a time we're going to reveal them. So you can see here that there's a section of another moon on there. So I'm just going to grab my eraser tool, make sure the layer is selected, and then I will erase the portion of the moon that was right there, so that, that looks good. Another thing you can do if you want is you can use the magic wand and select the white area around the moon and then go ahead and delete that if you want as well. I probably will. That way I just have the moon pieces that I'm dealing with. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to grab my eraser tool, which is really big. Let me make that smaller. So we'll do that, and then I'm going to select the white and delete it because I don't need it. And moving on. So next is layer 3. Let's put away layer 2. We're going to erase the sections, select the white, and delete it. I'm just going to do this to all of them, and then I'll tell you what happens next. Okay, so now I have all of these ready to go. So let me go ahead and bring them all back up so we can see all of the phases of the moon except for that middle one. And next what we're going to do is bring them one at a time over to the original larger file. So let's grab layer 1. We're going to copy it, Control C. I'm going to come back over to this title and paste it, and we can see it right here in the middle. From here, I want to transform it, so it's Control T, and that's going to give me the ability to make it bigger or smaller. And essentially what I want to do is make this so that it becomes part of the moon. So we're going to just expand it until it fills up the whole side. And then when I hit enter, it's going to bring it back into focus. So that's the first one. We're going to do the same thing. So let's grab the next one, and we're just going to create a full moon through these pieces. So let's bring that up to the top and bring that down to the bottom. That looks about right. And then we'll just keep going. So I'm going to do the right side first. Okay, so now I have all 6 of these pieces layered up on top of this original moon. So if I hide them all, we can see the moon behind it revealed. So next what I want to do is move each of these onto their own page, because now I want to add some text as well as figure out how to put in a photo. So let's grab one of these layers, and we're going to bring it over onto an 8.5 by 11 page. So you can see that is the correct sizing of the moon that we want. Now what I want to do is make sure that this is directly in the center, like so. And then I'm going to grab my ellipse tool. So it's in the shapes. If you hold down on the shape tool, click and hold on it, and then you'll get a menu and you can select the ellipse. So for this one, I want to fill it with maybe like a lighter gray color just so I can see how big the circle is. And my goal is to create a circle that is roughly the same size. Actually, that's not too bad, as the moon. So let's maybe go a teeny bit bigger. Let's put it underneath so we can see behind it. Yeah, that's really not too bad. So maybe like right here will be good. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So that gives me a moon circle behind it. So that's the size of the full normal moon. Now let's grab these together and stick them in the center. There we go. So now my plan is to put some text on a portion of it and a photo on a portion of it. So I want to find the middle. So I'm going to put this at 5.5 inches since that's half of 11. So the top half will be text, the bottom half will be a photo. So what I am going to do is create a text box. I do not want it to be inside of the circle. I just, I want to be able to adjust all of the things as much as I want, I suppose. Okay, so there we go. So let's call that our text box. And actually this I want to be black text. And what I would do here is just manually put in my text. So maybe I would say like phase 1, and then put in some spaces and say this is, and just add my text in. I'm going to just write gibberish so you can see what this is going to look like when we get the whole thing done. Okay, so let's say that's our text box, and we would have our normal, whatever we're going to say for our journaling in this position. So then the last thing I need to do is create my photo. So let's open up this one that I have here, and I'm just going to copy the whole thing, come back over onto my moon here, and I want to click on the ellipse, the circle that we made earlier, and paste my photo on top of that. So you can see it's behind the moon and behind the text. From here, I'm going to go into my layers panel, right click on the photo and select create clipping mask, and that's going to put it inside of the circle. Now for me, I only want my photo to be on the bottom portion. So I'm going to transform, Control T, the photo. And then we're just going to shrink it down until I get it where I want it to go, which I kind of like it right there. So when I put this in my album here, I will cut it right at this line. So this that you see up here is not going to be there. It's just easier for me to keep it on there for now. So it's going to be the circle here and then cut off on the top and cut off on the side so that it can go behind the moon, but my text will still be there. So what I want to do for printing these is I want to take this photo layer and the ellipse layer. I'm going to select them both and then right click and merge those layers together. This is going to let me take just that circle and paste it somewhere so you can see the photo is in there, and I will cut it off and then add it behind the moon later. Then I can hide the photo, and then I have just my moon and my text. So I would print this separately. I'm most likely going to print mine on matte photo paper just because I think that will give me the best coloration for my moons. And yes, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to print my moons like this with the text, and then I will print my photo separately on photo paper, and I will tape it or glue it in as we are working on each of the individual pages themselves. So that is what we're going to do here. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is print everything off, and then I will meet you back over at the craft table and we will finish putting everything together. Now that we're back over at my craft table, I am going to start getting to work on this spread by trimming out all of these circular elements using my circle cutter tool here, which is from Creative Memories. I do know that this tool does still exist, so I will add a link to it in the description box down below. It's just a nice tool that I like to have when I'm not going to use my silhouette cutting machine to actually cut the piece out. So this allows me to just cut a perfect circle using this tool plus my cutting mat, and it works out pretty nicely. There are multiple circles so that you can get lots of different sizes, and there are a couple of different blades. So each of the different blades has a little bit more distance in between where the dots are on the underside, which you can kind of see there, and the where the blade is. So it gives it a wider, a wider like girth around the circle. So I pulled over this blue one. The blue one is the furthest away, which you can kind of see here. And then I think the green one is the next furthest, and the red one is the closest, is how it works. So I put aside the larger circle there because I actually needed this to be a little bit more tight in next to those moons. So I'm going to use the smaller circle with the furthest away blade, if that makes sense. And then you can kind of see there how there is a pretty significant difference between the sizing of those circles. So for now, I went ahead and cut out all of the phases of the moon with my journaling on it. And then I decided that I actually wanted to take the title piece here and trim it down to the same size. So at first I'm going to try cutting it a little bit wider so that maybe the blue one is the closest. Honestly, I don't remember. I don't remember how far apart the blades are, but I do know that I tried to cut it a little bit wider to see what I thought about that, and then ultimately was like, yeah, nope, I actually need to just cut it as close as possible, just like I did for all of the phases of the moon, because for this to work the way that I want it to work, they all need to line up with each other perfectly, all of the circles. So they all need to be the exact same size. So there we go. I was a little bit sad to have to cut off all of those blue stars because I really like the way that they look, but that's okay. You still kind of see them on the title piece there. So now that I have everything trimmed out, next I wanted to go ahead and put them in order. So I've got a portion that goes like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then I have another pile that's phase 4, phase 5, and phase 6. Then once I had all of those in order, next I wanted to go ahead and start cutting out the photos that go with each of those phases of the moon so that I can add the photos onto the moon card as well. So I first try to just trim this out. So I'm going to trim it out with my scissors, and then I will cut along the straight edges so I can figure out, how much I need to cut off of the top. Because if you remember from the digital portion, I left them a bit taller than they need to be, figuring that when I actually went to assemble them, I could very easily trim off a portion of the top, that it wouldn't be too big of a deal. To trim these out, I could have brought out my paper trimmer and done it that way, but I thought it would be a little bit easier on me to just use my ruler and a craft knife. That might give me a little bit more precise of a cut, especially since the bottom portion is rounded, like it's not all straight edges. So it just allows me to use my eye and cut these out a little bit easier in that sense. This first one is definitely going to take me a little bit of time to figure out all of the different things I need to do to it, because at this point, all of this was just an idea in my head. I have never done anything like this before, so I, was just kind of winging it as I went along, and it ends up turning out awesome. But it does take me a little bit of time to figure out how the heck to get this to do what I want it to do. So I trimmed the photo out, and then the next thing I needed to do was to figure out the center point on the moon itself, because what I'm going to do is fold this in half in order to create an interactive flip book of these phases of the moon, which will make way more sense as we start putting this together. So I grabbed out my scoreboard. I created a score mark in the middle. It's not quite perfect, so I refolded it again and pressed it down with my bone folder. I'm going to get rid of the scoring board and decide to just fold them in half, and whatever, it doesn't matter if it's not the most beautiful crease mark I've ever seen in my life. It's totally fine. So I folded it in half there, and then realized that my photo is too large. So I need to trim it down a little bit more. I wanted the curve to be to match the curve of the actual moon better. So what I did is I grabbed a piece of just regular copy paper. I trimmed it into a circle that is the same circle as all of the moon pieces. And then I'm going to take my photo, line it up on the bottom there, and use the just regular paper as a template to help me trim around the outside of the photo. So then once I did that, you can see that it's a little bit better in the sense of, how it flows along the side of the moon there. So then I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I get this photo next to the moon but not cover up the moon? So I was thinking about trimming a piece off of it, but that was just a little bit too complicated, a little too hard for me to do. So what I did is I took my craft knife again and I trimmed a line along the edge of the moon where the photo is going to go. And I did leave purposefully a little bit of white because I wanted there to be a little bit of separation in between the image of the moon and the image that I have printed. So then once I trimmed this down even further, I could slip it into that that cut that I made, and then have the portion show up on the moon, and then you can see how there's a little bit of white separation in between the photo and the moon itself. Flip it over on the back, add a tiny bit of adhesive underneath the photo so that it all sticks down and stays together nicely. So that was my first one that I did. The rest of them are going to be a lot easier because now that I know how to do this, I can do it much quicker. So I am once again going to just fold this in half, crease it with my bone folder, open it back up, and then cut the line on the side of the moon here. Then we're going to grab over my photo and trim it down. I'll skip over a bunch of the trimming it part since you guys know how I do it at this point. And then I'm going to stick it again in the slot so that the photo goes on the front side of the white space and then on the back side of the moon. And it totally works out awesome. So for my photos, I went through some older photos and found a couple from my early childhood. So I've got the one for phase 1 is actually the photo my mom took on the first day of kindergarten for me. And then on the next moon, the one I'm doing right now, is a photo of me from middle school, from the first day of middle school. For this one, now that I have the photo on there, I'm going to go ahead and attach these first two phases together. So I added my adhesive to the top side of the phase 2 moon card, and I'm going to attach the bottom side of the phase 1 moon card onto the top. So you can kind of see how it's going to fold down to reveal the next phase of the moon, if that makes sense. For this next one, again, I'm just going to crease it in half. I left a lot of this footage in because I think it can be a little confusing how to put the actual moon together. And since I had never done this before, I didn't streamline it as much as I could have, or what I want to say, like assembly line it, right? Like I could have folded all of the moons in half first and then cut a line along all the sides of all the moons next, and then trimmed out all the photos next. Like I could have done it that way, but I didn't. So in order for you guys to see the full process of how this comes together, there is a little bit more video footage than normal. Okay, so this is phase 3. This would have been my high school picture. I have a picture from my high school prom with 2 of my best girlfriends from those high school days. And then I'm just adding some more adhesive onto this one in order to attach it to the phase before. So it's the top of phase 3 attaches to the bottom of phase 2, and then they all start to fold, like this. So now that I've got phases 1 through 3 attached, the next thing I want to do is add on my title piece, because this is going to serve as the halfway mark, and plus it's the full moon. So you've got like the crescent, and then I don't honestly know what the moon phases are called. I know there's a crescent moon, I know there's a half moon, and I know there's a full moon, and I don't know what's in between the half and the crescent, but that's okay. Yeah, I don't have to be a scientist. It's okay. I know there's just phases. So we've got the first 3, then we're going to have the full moon phase on the top, and then we'll attach the next phases. So phase 4, 5, and 6 to the bottom of that title piece. So when we are looking at this page, we're going to have the title piece be the main feature of the page, and then you can flip it to see the photos and phases and journaling on either side of that full moon. So now that we have that, and I'm working on the next side, this one I am actually going to assembly line. So we're going to fold all of the moons in half, and then once we have them all folded in half, the next thing I will do is grab my my craft knife and cut along all of the edges. It goes so much quicker when you assembly line it and not do it one piece at a time, but that's okay. I really needed to figure out on that first half how this was going to work, because sometimes when it comes to working with paper, and it's almost like paper engineering, like figuring out how to take something and make it work in a specific way. When you're doing that, sometimes you just have to work one step at a time in order to make an idea in your head turn into something of a reality in front of you. So once I had that done, I trimmed out all the photos, added them into the grouping. So you can see now I've got the photos lined up with the phase of the moon they go to. And then I'm going to go ahead and just start adding them in. So we've got this one, which is my phase 4 card. This one is all about college. So this would have been when Aaron and I met. I've got a picture of us from when we went to Cedar Point one summer, and that was really fun. I think we were dating at the time. I'm pretty sure we were dating at the time, but it would have been college years for us. Then for phase 5, I talked about getting married. So this was, learning to be married and have a spouse and be a wife and all of that kind of stuff. And then for phase 6, I talked about becoming a parent. So phase 6 is parenthood for me, and just, what it means to be at this phase of life, a parent, especially a parent to young children right now, because, phases will change even within parenthood for us. So that is that. There are my last phases. So now that I have that done, I just need to go ahead and put all of these pieces together. So for this one, we'll do the top of phase 6 will go to the bottom of phase 5, and then the top of 5 will go to the bottom of 4, and the top of 4 will attach to the middle piece, if that makes sense. So I think that this is just a really fun story to tell. And another thing that could be really cool to do with something like this would be to almost make it into a sort of mini album. So let's say that you added some maybe pattern paper to the back side or the bottom side of those last phases, and then maybe added some Velcro dots on top of that. So you know how there's those party favors or like centerpieces that have the honeycomb, they're like paper, what do I want to say, like tissue paper honeycomb things that you can open up and turn around and then attach them together and they become this 3D thing. You could totally do that with something like this, like add some Velcro to the outsides of it, and then you could wrap it around and Velcro it together, and you've got like this moon, almost like a moon ornament of sorts. It could also be really fun to do something like that with like literal ornaments for Christmas time. I need to remember that. That could be really cool. So the last portion that I have here to actually create before we stick down the moon portion is to create my background paper. So I used my embellishment mousse in the mother of pearl color. I used the stencil that we created in silhouette there, and then just applied the mousse to the stencil with a spatula. I let that dry overnight, so you can see that there are these like iridescent almost cream-like colored stars here on the paper. This probably also would have been really cool on some dark blue or even black paper, because that mother of pearl would have still shown up. So if you're not a fan of the white background or feel like that's a little bit too much white space for this project, you could totally do it on some other color or even like a star pattern paper and then add some additional texture stars on there too. That would be super cool. So once that dried overnight, I came back. I'm going to add some adhesive to the back side of this full moon element here. I did go ahead and hole punch this first just because I don't know if this moon piece would interfere with my hole puncher later. So I did go ahead and do that first. I used score tape because this is a pretty substantial thing here, and I wanted to make sure that it was going to stay stuck down and not cause any problems with the paper itself. But then I did also add some additional adhesive around the outside of the circle, so the perimeter of the circle itself. Once I had that the way I liked it, I stuck it down into the middle of this page, and then I'm also going to leaf through all of it just to make sure that everything is like folded correctly and all of that. So that is my moon element there, which is so cool. I love it. Last but not least, I'm going to add my date stamping for when I recorded this story, and that'll do it. All right, friends, so that finishes my spread for today. This one is really fun and interactive, so we can flip all the way to the back and start with phase 1 of life, which is childhood, and then I did middle school, then high school, and then I've got my centerpiece, college, married life, and parenthood. So really fun just to highlight the different phases of my life so far. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this process video and seeing this go from something digital on my computer to here it is in physical form in its fully functional, interactive self. If you did enjoy this video, I would love a thumbs up down below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so you can catch all of my future crafty videos. I'll be back later this week with a Project Life spread as well as a Story Kit Crush spread at the end of the week. So hopefully I will see you guys in those videos. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye, friends.